Hello and welcome to the Adventure Habits podcast from Splash Maps, featuring me, David Overton, your host. I'm the MD of Splash Maps, and every episode we bring another inspirational adventurer to your attention. And my belief is that this adventurer that we have today, Ben Smith from Peak Planet, is going to have some great advice for you, and in particular, a focus for anyone who's ever considered Africa's tallest mountain, Kilimanjaro. Ben, say hi to our listeners and watchers out there.
Hi, everybody. Nice to meet you, and nice to be here with you, David.
It's great to have you here as well, Ben. And I mean, I'm absolutely thrilled that you chose to have Splash Maps, and you've actually purchased them for all your Sherpas out there. And that was after a customer of ours actually showed them to, I think, to your Sherpas or even to you.
Yeah. So we had one of your customers that brought them with them, and our team was really impressed. And they left a few. Well, the ones they bought, they left with our team, and then they came back and ordered new ones for you. And so that drove us to order some for the rest of our team. So
It's great because people stand by those maps, but when you get professionals, mountain leaders that actually adopt them and start using them on a regular basis with their clients, that means so much. And it's a great tick in the box, isn't it? Really, it's
well, for sure. On an adventure like Kili, it's a big mountain, and the guides, they do it regular, so they don't necessarily need a map to know where they're going. But it's nice for people to have a visual because they haven't been there before, and it's really helpful, especially Westerners. They read maps, and so when you can point out on a map where you are, where you've come from, where you're going, and kind of show people a little bit better. And nothing better than a fabric map because they get wet, and tissue maps end up tearing when you use them a lot and so on. So
That too right, too right. The funny thing is, in France, a fabric map is called a map en tissu,
yeah,
and in Britain, obviously, and probably America, the tissue means something completely different. It's not going to fragment and fall to pieces. It's
yeah,
not made
exactly.
of paper. It's fabric, right?
Yeah,
So we always have
yeah,
to
the
get over
paper
that
maps.
little
Yeah.
language barrier there.
Oh
But
yeah.
those superb, and thanks so much for getting those. So you're regularly going up Kilimanjaro. Ben, why don't you tell us a little bit about Peak Planet? Who is it for, and how did you get started with it?
Yeah, so my adventure with Peak Planet started not that long ago. I mean, in about 2014 or 2015. I was already in Tanzania and working in the safari industry and a little bit on the mountain and so on. And I actually came across the one of the owners of Peak Planet at the time, the founder, and they were really frustrated because they were working with a local company, and it just the product wasn't quite what they wanted. And so at that time I just said, hey, why don't you create your own product? There's no reason to be reselling somebody else's product. Like, what your customers want, the values, what is important to them. So, let's break this down and let's do it. And so, in those days we sat down, we built a team, we measured all the things that were valuable to people, particularly the clients that were coming mainly with Peak Planet. And usually it's mostly Americans, but also some British, some Australians. But with Peak Planet, most of the clients are 60 and plus. So it's not your 20-year-olds, 30-year-olds. I mean, we'd still get a fair amount of 20 and 30-year-olds, but it's people that kind of value spending a little bit more to have better quality, and to really have an ethical climb, with a team that's well educated, well diverse, and well experienced. And so that's what we focused on, is really giving the best we can at a fair price. Because you can look around at Keeley. There's some companies that are just charging an outrageous amount for it. They give a good product, but they probably spend 3 or 4 times in marketing than other regular companies, and therefore the customer pays for that.
They
And
pass that on. Yeah.
we feel that that's not very fair. So we wanted to find good value for your money. So that's what we focused on when we built Peak Planet. Our client base, their needs, and so that's where we are today. So
So it sounds like quite a broad customer base that you can relate to. So
yeah,
this could be
definitely.
ages from the young to the old. Not so many in the 20 to 30 bracket, but it's. I think you were saying to me beforehand there are people that you actually take up Kili, which is of course like what's it 4 5 days perhaps
Yeah,
of
so
climb.
most of the treks we do are 8 or 9 days in total. So it's 6 days going up, 2 days coming down, or 7 days going up and 2 days coming down. There are shorter routes, but again, we focus on quality. So we want people to have the right amount of time to acclimate and to do Kili safe. That's the most important part is safety here.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and yeah, so we get quite a few different people. I mean, we've had groups where there's a 16-year-old and a 74-year-old in the same group, and they didn't know each other before, and they come out like they're family members afterwards. So
Right.
it's
It's
quite
a
a
bucket list
diverse
thing for
group,
so many
yeah.
people.
Yeah, and when you do a adventure like that, it's life changing. So,
Yeah.
which so many adventures are, but this one is it kind of hits you differently because you've got so much time in your own mind, so you can process a lot of your own personal self, but you're also doing it with a team, and so it's not just the local team, but the other climbers that are with you. Um,
Yeah.
so it
So a lot of people.
creates, yeah, it creates an affinity. So.
Yeah, well, that's great. So and you work on it there. I guess I'm seeing in my mind, nice breakfasts and recharging, ready for the day. The next day, getting to the next stage on the mountain, etc.
Mhm.
Um, how do you work to you sound like you've got a diversity of people that go up there. And
Yeah,
I did hear a statistic that there are a large number of people that actually don't make it all the way up
yeah,
to Kili. They have to turn around and go back.
yeah.
How do you make sure that your very diverse group, some might be moving off quite quickly and some of them might want to move at a slower pace? How do you make sure that that at least the majority of them make it up to the top?
Yeah, well, so again, we're focused on safety, and safety comes with acclimating properly. To acclimate properly, there's only a few things we can control. So the
Mm,
first one's the speed that you hike at. So that's a factor we can control. The second one is the water intake. So there's a lot of evidence that shows the more water you drink while you're hiking, the better you're going to acclimate. So we do monitor people and encourage them to drink a lot of water.
mm.
And then the third thing, which is a personal but medical decision as well, is whether to use Diamox or not. Again, about half climbers use Diamox to help prevent altitude sickness and so on, another half don't. It's kind of a personal decision based on medical advice from each person's doctor and so on. But those are the only three things we can control. The rest is
Yeah.
kind of nature and how it goes. So we start with a very slow pace, and this can be challenging for people that are in really good shape or very young people.
Mm.
Our hardest clients are 20-year-old military guys. We've had some military groups, and I'll pre-brief them in advance, because the trek's easy. It's an easy hike for them because they're used to it. They're really in great shape.
They've been trained. Yeah.
Yeah, they've been trained, and they also know how to take the pain and just kind of deal with it. Where the rest of us that haven't had that training, when it gets tough, we slow down, and when the guide says slow down, you're like, hey, great, I'll slow down a bit because this is getting a little bit hard. And so it's just really getting in that mindset that altitude is something that you can't prepare for. You just
Yeah.
gotta take it as it comes and go slowly, and let your body adapt, because that's what's happening. So if you're in great shape and you're young and you're rushing up, you're going to get sick because your body hasn't had that time to adapt. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, that sometimes it's a hard hit lesson when we've got some younger people in a group, some older people in a group, and the younger people want to rush through, and they end up starting to feel altitude sickness. Well, the older people that are going slow, who in their mind, are like, oh yeah, those guys, they're not ready, they're not in shape. Well, guess who's being successful on the summit? It's the older people that are taking their time, and sometimes that's a hard lesson for people to see. So.
And yeah, and it's something I've seen firsthand as well, doing the Inca Trail
Mm.
to
Yeah.
Machu Picchu in Peru, because my well now wife, but I was traveling with Tiffany at the time. Um, we'd spent a long time in Venezuela, then Ecuador, and then into Peru.
Mhm.
We were quite acclimatized to being at high altitude, and so we were finding it quite a straightforward hike for us.
Yeah.
But people who'd just flown in, they had a much harder time, and the trick for them would have been to take an extra day in the climb up.
Exactly.
So it's good to hear that you work for that pace, and I'm sure there's people listening here who would be keen to. There's so many people that have Kilimanjaro on their bucket list, well,
Mhm.
myself included. So I, what an exciting thing. And
Well, and
so,
the encouraging thing with Kilimanjaro is, I mean, the numbers show us that when you're older, maybe it's experience, maybe it's just, you know, understanding your body better, but you actually tend to do better. And
yeah,
so people, a lot of times, people are contacting us that are 65, 70, and they're like, I just don't know if I can do it. And I said, actually, you're our prime, like perfect client because you're ready to listen, and so that's something that's great with Kitty is that it encourages people that kind of they start to doubt whether they're still ready for these kinds of adventures, and Kitty, it's there, and it's actually prime for people that are older and taking it easier and so on. I mean, of course you have the physical shape that you need to work on, but Kitty, there's no technical side, so people can pretty much as long as you can get out and walk and do good distances, Kili can be an adventure for you. So,
yeah, and Tanzania is a beautiful country to find yourself in.
of course,
So off to
yeah,
go safarying afterwards or before, or any of the other treats that they've got there, Lake Tanganyika, and it's just a stunning country.
definitely.
Is the is that where there's the Ngorongoro crater there, or
Yes,
that's on the
yeah. So we've
yeah
got
that
Serengeti, we've got the Ngorongoro crater, Tarangire, also
mm.
Zanzibar, which now it's getting fairly crowded. So you got to time it right and know the places to go in Zanzibar to have a nice, relaxing time. But
Well, I'm absolutely thrilled that you're actually going to be able to tell people about this firsthand at Splash Maps' stand, AC138, at the Destination Show on the 29th and 30th of this month.
yeah,
So we're absolutely thrilled to welcome you to the stand. And there will be I'm hoping there'll be a lot of very relevant people there. Our stand is in the America section, so more your
excellent.
target audience
Mhm.
rather than the target African area. But there'll be people listening to this who will want to come along and want to meet you and ask you probably even more thrilling questions than I'm asking you here.
Excellent. I look
But I
forward
am
to it.
intrigued though. You alluded to working in safari, and you were in Tanzania already. How did all that happen?
Yeah, so it's kind of a long adventure. So I actually spent quite a few years in West Africa in development work. And then I found myself in agriculture and ended up in Spain and then back to Tanzania to build, it was actually in Kenya, but building a camp in the Masai Mara. And then working there for a couple of companies and then starting up with my wife, a safari operation, which she runs. And yeah, and so that's that's been the adventure. So it's quite a long path, but yeah, it's kind of never ending. So there's always twists and turns. So,
So there's a lot of adventure in your life even before you started taking people on their bucket list adventure to get up to Kilimanjaro.
well, for some of
Abs-
us, it's in our blood, I guess. So,
yeah.
so
Born free.
exactly.
Okay, well, look. I've as you know with this podcast, it's about giving people great advice
Hmm.
on how they might prepare for adventure, what they might do on adventure, and so we call those adventure habits. That's the name of the pod.
Yeah,
And Ben, I'm wondering if you've got 5 prepared adventure habits for our audience to listen to.
I
What
do.
would be your first adventure habit?
Wow. it was very hard to narrow it down, and so I kind of went for some bigger habits, So the first thing I looked at it, was what is adventure, and kind of thinking about that aspect, And it's easy to confuse adventure with adrenaline, I mean, people think skydiving and roller coasters and stuff like that's adventure, but to me that's kind of confusing the two because the emotions are very similar. But
Mm.
for me, adventure is just frankly getting out of your comfort zone. And I mean, you can have adventure in your backyard. You can have it, walking into a room full of people you have no idea who they are. That can be an adventure. It doesn't need to be something crazy. It just needs to be something that gets you out of that comfort zone. So
Mhm.
so to me, that habit is to figure out where that comfort zone is, and then make a habit of breaking out of that from time to time. For people that are starting off, baby steps. It's just kind of think about like, oh, I don't really like to talk to people I don't know. Well, break out of that and approach somebody at the grocery store or something like that. Start some small chat. I mean, it doesn't have to be huge adventures. That's what it starts small. And then once you start feeling out of that comfort zone, then it widens it and it makes it a little bit bigger. And so, you may start out just by talking to a stranger and saying hello, and then all of a sudden you're on top of Kili, or, even going to Everest Base Camp, or, doing something that you would have never imagined, some years back. So that's my first one, is just to break out of that comfort zone and make it a habit to do that. So,
Oh, fantastic. So, I mean, I can think of many, many things I bet everyone can think of something in their lives that they kind of like dread a bit,
exactly.
or is holding them back. And then, so the answer is just do it, maybe on a small scale, and build from there.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So, yeah, I think you're right. The hardest part of that is finding where your comfort zones are.
Mhm.
It's almost as if you need someone else to tell you it as well. I've seen that you're not comfortable amongst other people, or you're not comfortable with heights, or you're not comfortable with this, that, and the other.
Yeah, but I think all of us kind of know where they are, because we sense that, like, oh, I'm going to avoid this situation. I'm going to avoid doing this or that, because well, if you dig in, why? Well, because it's not in your comfort zone. And so I
Yeah.
think that when you feel that, that's the time where you say, hey, let's go for an adventure. Let's break that comfort zone a little bit, and start to break that barrier. So
Yeah, yeah. Well, great. Well, I think that's a great number one, and it's a great place for us all to start. So it deserves its place as number one. But what deserves its place as your second
well,
adventure
I
habit?
think the second one is kind of the question as to why, and I watched a few of the other podcasts here, and a lot of them were talking about purpose and so on, and and I think that question is different for everybody. It's why do we do it, and I think that it's part of living, it's part of experiencing life, remembering we have one life, and the other thing that I just it's been on my mind, and I didn't really know how to capture this, but I think a lot of adventure and a lot of what goes on these days isn't really driven by ourselves. It's driven by the image we want other people to see of us. And I think we need to kind of reverse that back. I mean, we used to have an old saying when I was growing up, it says dance like no one's watching, it's a kind of just let loose, and do what do your thing, and don't worry about what other people think. And somehow we've reversed that, and now people are doing things because they think it'll attract attention or get a lot of likes and so on. And I mean we're both in business that we rely a lot on social media, and unfortunately we've reversed our things on its head, and I think so that leads me to the other thing, is to dig within yourself and say, why do I want to do this, and find that the right reason for you, and hopefully not let it be guided by a perception that other people are going to have of you. And the habit that comes with that I wanted to
Mm.
just draw out the habit, is find your curiosity and let it guide you. Because when we grow up, being around young people and kids, they're curious about things. They say, wow, I wonder what's over there. I wonder why do we do it this way, and so on. And I think as we get older, we kind of squash that curiosity. And so I think that if you're not really quite sure, remember when you were young. I mean, heck, if no one had curiosity, like imagine what the world would be, because nobody would be asking the questions like, hey, I wonder if there's a shorter route to India, things like that. I mean, um, and so that's my second habit would be, find that curiosity, that inner child curiosity that you had. And
Yeah.
if you squashed it, let it come out, and let that guide you, and that'll help you kind of push you and motivate you. So,
Oh, that's brilliant. That's the whole purpose for having kind of the adventure habits in the first place is to kind of fuel those curiosities. And I think you're right. We're I wouldn't say we're ever trained to be curious when we're children. It's just we get trained in a lot of stuff
mhm,
afterwards, and maybe the advent of social media means that we then grab for what's easy, which
yeah,
is, see what else is thrilling other people, and surely that will thrill me too. But it doesn't necessarily always follow that way. And
exactly.
yeah, so well, I think that's a terrific number two, and I do like, whenever I dance, it's always preferable if nobody's watching. So
Yeah, me as well.
it chimes with me. What's your third one, Ben?
Well, so the third one is to make it a habit to develop your humility. I think that's something that somehow goes away when we start getting adventurous. It's very easy to focus on yourself. And I think that the humility of, understanding that you're not to be self-centered, not to focus on yourself,
Yeah,
to self-reflect, to think about the impacts you're having. Ask yourself, am I respecting myself? Am I respecting the other people around me? Am I respecting the environment? Because unfortunately, as we adventure more and people adventure more, places get crowded, and more people are going to the places that are great adventures, like Kilimanjaro, Everest Base Camp, or the Serengeti, or everywhere is just getting more and more people. And if we're all self-conscious and have some humility, it will help make that work better. Where if we all kind of go into it and it's about me, then that loses the whole purpose of this. I think that when you put yourself before everything else, that's it's something that tends to happen when you get more adventurous. But we need to remember and keep a grasp on reality.
yeah,
um, and that's part of it. And the other thing that I kind of learned over the years is it's an add-on here. I don't really know how to incorporate it in, but is to know when to go with the flow. I've
yeah,
been in some really weird situations, and for me it was totally out of my comfort zone because I had no control of what was going on, and I'm kind of a control person. um, and just to sit back and be like, hey, there's nothing I can do about this, I just need to go with the flow, and so be it. And I felt that sometimes that's also kind of reflecting on humility, to realize that, yeah, you might be standing on Kilimanjaro, or doing something that's amazing for you, but remember that there's people that do that every day. Or if you're in the middle of the jungle somewhere, and I mean, I found myself in the middle of Cameroon and thinking, wow, no one's ever been here before, and there's people that live there, and they lived
yeah,
there for generations, and it's like, wow. And when you think about it that way, it's something amazing for you, and a first, and kind of something you push your boundaries. But there's people that's their life, and so kind of remember that. And that leads me into the next one, but we can, I don't know if you have some reflections there.
well, yeah, yeah. I mean, I think it's terrific. It made me think actually about how adventure may have changed really in the course of a generation. Really, one of our ambassadors is John Blashford Snell, who's
Mm,
one of Britain's finest adventurers, and his when you see his film from the 1970s where he's driving a Land Rover across the Darien Gap, or Range Rover, right, a
mm,
prototype Range Rover across the Darien Gap. Um, if that's now one of the most crowded transit routes for people heading up towards the north part of America, whereas
mm,
he was the first to drive a vehicle across. And looking back at some of his stuff in the 1970s, it was all about uh, trapping or killing animals to take
Mhm.
back as to give to give us examples to museums and things
Yeah.
like that. And of course, all of that has changed now. He's changed, all
Mhm.
of that attitude has changed in him as an adventurer, and thankfully in the world. I guess the unfortunate thing is that there are so many more of us now
Yeah.
adventuring. So your message of humility, particularly with regards to people who are already there, is such an important one. So yeah, thank you for that. You were going to go on to the fourth one.
Yeah, well, so it plays off one another. I think for me, it's really important to have that habit of seeing things from a different perspective.
Mm,
And that goes in so many different ways. Seeing things from other people's shoes, and so on. And I think that that's something that's helped us, develop the products and our experiences that we provide to our travelers is by being able to put ourselves in their shoes. And in Kili, it's to me it's not frightening because it's part of my everyday life, but to be able to step back and to say, hey, how does this feel for somebody who has never slept in a tent, and this
mm.
is their first time going in a tent, and I mean they've
It's
decided to go
extraordinary.
big,
Yeah,
like wow. So how can we understand what they're going through and their emotional experience, and how can we make it easier and guide them through, and and give them a better experience, and I think unfortunately this is a habit that I wish everybody would have. I think we'd have a different planet if we were all able to do this a bit better, to put ourselves in other people's shoes, because
yeah,
it helps to avoid conflict, when you can understand where other people are coming from. I mean, one that's great is, people in the Serengeti, you're out on safari, you're looking at lions and so on, and then you hear that, a lion's been killed by a local tribe, and you can't understand why, and you just think, wow, these people are terrible because they're killing this animal, and to be able to put yourself in the other side of it and try to understand why would they be doing that, and what's the perspective and what's the reasoning behind it. I don't think anyone really just goes out and says, hey, I want to kill this animal today. There's some drive behind it, because there's always a risk involved and so on. So I think that's a habit that it's not necessarily with adventure, it's just with life. I think that always putting yourself, or making the habit of putting yourself in other perspectives, to try to understand situations and what you're experiencing in your adventure as well. So
yeah. And in large, and in groups, that's very important as well. It's
yeah.
always when in groups, it's always very interesting to see who are the ones that are looking to help other people, rather than just focusing on their own aches and pains and whatever.
Exactly.
And it does make for a much better adventure, in my experience. Um, so that brings us on to, so that's about putting yourself in others' shoes. I can see
Yeah.
how those two work together.
Yeah.
Um, and what is your fifth and final
Well, so
adventure
the
habit?
fifth one, it actually kind of derives. We did the team building and workshop with our guides this December. And it was really good, and it was great to see everybody develop, and really amazing. And one of the things we talked about is routines. And so the trainers, they really worked on people getting in routines, and which are very similar to habits as well. So routines, habits, they can kind of correspond. And I thought a lot about this because, routines can be great. They can get you in great shape. They can, kind of drive your day. But they can also be what prevents you from breaking out of your comfort zone, from doing these adventures, And so that's my last habit, is to break your routines. From time to time, to break those routines. I've got an acquaintance that, she trains, I think, 2 or 3 hours a day in the gym, like just nuts. And the person will not travel because she would have a day or two without being able to be in a gym and do her workout routine. Great, she's in great shape, fantastic. But I just think, that's become her comfort zone. And so that routine has actually kind of trapped her, even though it's a great routine to have. I mean, I'd love to be able to go to the gym a couple hours a day and be
Yeah,
in the same shape. But, so that would be it's great to have habits and routines in this, but I think a good habit is actually to break that routine from time to time. Remind yourself, that you don't want the routine controlling you. You want to
Yeah.
control your routines. So
Oh, I like that. Yeah. Um, Yeah, not letting the routine control you, I think
yeah,
is quite. A lot of things spring to my mind of routines in my own life. There's a regular way I get up and whatever, and I seem to be stuck in that because it works.
yeah,
But that means my
exactly.
mind's not necessarily open to another way of doing it. But I certainly wouldn't go to the extent of letting it prevent the fitness and health that I've built up by doing those things in the
Mm,
morning. They can be directed to doing a lot more adventurous stuff.
yeah,
And I think my personal belief is the more we adventure, the more we're improving our lives.
exactly.
And as you've described, adventure is always within reach. It's not. It doesn't have to be a big thing.
Mm,
And I think that's useful for people to hear from someone who climbs Africa's biggest mountain on the most regular basis. So it's
yeah.
it's
Well, I
great
wish
to
I
hear.
could do it more. Knee problems, over the years. They give some new challenges. So it's not going up the mountains, coming down the mountain. That's the tough part.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
That can be the hard thing. Good pair of boots, I'm reckoning.
yeah, that helps, and some nice trekking poles.
Yeah, too right. Okay, so I'll just summarize those for you. So the first one is about finding your comfort zone and making a habit of getting out of the comfort zone. What a great piece of advice that is. And then, most importantly as well, or just as important, is the second one, which is why. Why are you doing this, and not to slavishly follow the last thing that you thought it looked like people were having a great time doing on Instagram, but actually just finding out what thrills you, and
Mhm,
then that's the basis of your why. um, i think I think you said it best with the phrase "find your curiosity." And we've all had a bit of curiosity crush as we get into our middle and later years, and I think that's something that we all need to get past, and then make it a habit to focus on others. I think
mhm.
that's going to make for a happy group going up any mountain, I'd imagine. And being able to put yourself in others' shoes is sort of marries tightly with that one
Yeah.
as well. And then to break the routines and don't let them drive you, but you make sure that you're driving those routines. And those routines, they're there to help take us to a better place anyway, right?
Mhm.
So, that, well, with any luck, and if they're not, just ditch them.
Exactly.
Well, I think I'm so thrilled, Ben, that you're going to be joining us at Destinations. At the show, I will make sure that we have a Kili map. I'm not sure it will be one of the ones we made for you, but they're beautiful ones with your
Yeah.
logo on and the routes going up,
Well, I'll
etc.
bring one or two of the ones that I have here. So I'll
Oh,
bring them.
wonderful! That will be so special for people coming to ask you questions about it.
Yeah.
And in terms of long distance trails, etc., I'm just going to hold this one up for you. So that's my Camino Inglés. So whenever I've gone to France, which of course is where Ben is most often based, near Nantes, um, whenever I go to France, the areas that I go into, there's always some intersection with the Caminos heading over to Santiago. So this year is the year that I discovered that there's actually a Camino Inglés. So there's an English
Hmm.
one, there's a Scottish, there's several routes in Scotland, and there's more. I'm not going to wait for people to write. Do write in and let me know all the Caminos around the world, and I will quite happily host them on the website. Yeah, here's the challenge: I shall set up a link to take people to a map that will be perfect for their Camino. There we go, committed. Uh, and yeah, so we did that this just over the last few days between Christmas and just after New Year. 77 miles, and yeah, and quite an easy go because we live near it, and adventure is always quite close. You don't necessarily have to go far, but the best way to find adventure might be to come to Olympia on the 29th, 30th of January and meet me hosting Ben on the Splash Map stand AC138. Ben, I'm so thrilled to have had you on the show. I know people will have learned a lot. I know that a lot of our listeners and watchers are keen on Kilimanjaro. They just need to take that next step, get out of their comfort zone, and not let their routines prevent them from spending some fabulous time with you in Tanzania.
Excellent.
Okay, Ben, I'd just like to thank you very much.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. It was a pleasure.
Bye bye, and
Yeah,
see you in
in a few
London.
weeks. Yeah, see you there.